Welcome to our relaunch of Mariano's Meetups. We're so excited to be here because it is not only Thirsty Thursday, but it's Tequila Thursday. And we're here with Jaime Salas from Milagro, who's going to show us 2 great cocktails, and I'm sure lots of great tips. And he's like the coolest, one we've had yet with that awesome apron, and we're very jealous of it. But you'll tell us that story because it's like one of a kind, like he is. And so we're excited to get started because it's time for happy hour. We also just want to remind everyone this is a great place that we started when we all were under quarantine to get together, learn some cooking tips and mixology skills, and taste wine together. You can definitely ask Jaime anything you like in the chat, and we'll make sure we ask him. And just be kind, which everyone has been. So it's been a really nice platform. And other than that, I mean, I'm excited to learn more about Milagro and make some cocktails.
Beautiful. Well, Amanda, thank you very much. Thank you guys very much for having me. My name is Jaime Salas. I am the National Ambassador for Milagro Tequila. And I'm here to share with you everything I know about it. As Amanda mentioned, anything you want to know about Milagro specifically the category in general, I am your guy. I've been doing this professionally for well over 20 years. And I've been a tequila lover, an agave lover, and as I was just telling Amanda, a mezcal lover, which tequila is a type of, for much longer than that. We'll leave it there. So anything you want to know, by all means. Today I want to feature 2 cocktails, one premised around what Milagro is known for, and that is we're very big on fresh ingredients. And a lot of the stuff you'll see on our platform, whether it's Instagram, whether it's our webpage, are all cocktails that I've designed, and I've always designed them in mind to really, really accentuate those beautiful nuances that Milagro is known for. We exclusively make 100% blue agave tequilas. We don't make anything less. So we have essentially, and Amanda's going to show us part of our other portfolio when we get to the second cocktail, but we have what we call our core range of tequilas, which are these here, our long, beautifully crafted core range bottles comprised of a silver, a reposado, and añejo, all 100% blue agave. As I go to make the cocktail, by the way, I will put my thing down here so you guys can see, and I will even show you guys as we progress throughout. But what I want to say about the other part of the portfolio is we have our upper echelon expression, if you will, that is comprised also of 3 expressions, a silver, a reposado, and añejo, and that's called Milagro Select Barrel Reserve, which if you look at the screen, you'll see she's got a beautiful agave with the hand blown, with the hand tacked agave on the inside. So that is part of our separate echelon, and I'll explain a little bit more about how that differentiates from our core range. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our, what I like to call perhaps our most spiciest and most vegetable forward, and probably one of the biggest crowd pleasers I've concocted since I've been working on the brand, which I've been on Milagro now for 10 years, and that's the Mercadito. The Mercadito, basically, why it's called the Mercadito, it essentially encapsulates everything you would typically find, or the vibe you would typically get after walking into a Mexican market, right? There's a lot of color, robust color, there's a lot of greens, reds, a lot of different types of chiles. So this here is going to be very savory, very vegetal, and it's going to meld perfectly well with Milagro's bright agave, vegetal, slightly fruity, and citric notes. So I'm going to ask that you guys pull out, assuming you're going to concoct along with Amanda and myself, your shaker. Now, what I will start by saying is you don't need one of these fancy Boston shakers. If you've attended other courses before, Amanda, can I see yours? You have a 3-piece, correct? All right, so Amanda there has a 3-piece shaker comprised of a base, right? A lid, and then a strainer already worked in. I do not. I have your classic Boston shaker, which you can find very economically online. Amazon is a godsend. There's 1,000 versions of these, anything from $1.99 up to, a couple $100 for coppers, etc. styled Boston shakers. But these work perfectly. Now, what I'll say to that is, if you don't have one of these, don't fret. If you're a workout person, pull out your protein shaker. Anything works as long as you can create a nice little seal. You're good. So this here is where we're going to cook everything together. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down a little bit. Amanda's going to go with me. And we're going to start with a pinch of cilantro. So we're going to throw in, I know some people have aversion to cilantro. I personally love it. If you're a cilantro fan, if you like cilantro in your guacamole, this is a perfect time to go nuts, go crazy, and put as much as you want in there. I do a hearty, nice pinch myself. Now, I don't know about Amanda, but I personally love heat. So I concocted this cocktail and I suggest that you use 1 round of jalapeno, but I'm going to do 3. Amanda, how many are you going to do?
Because I trust you, I'm gonna do 3 too.
Well, I have a little.
I have 4 here, but I'll do 3.
Beautiful. Well, I have an anecdote here for the crowd. If you're interested, here's something interesting to know. If you want something a little sharper, go with the Serrano pepper. Serranos to this day have not been manipulated as much, right? In terms of propagation, in terms of growing, in terms of cultivating the plant. So we're finding that jalapenos have less and less heat these days. And if you try them out, you'll find that they're not consistently hot. Sometimes you get a jalapeno that's, I see Sarah shaking her head, but you'll get a jalapeno that tastes like a bell pepper. And that's part of the problem right now is how we're, right? So I would suggest if you like a really sharp heat, swap out your jalapeno for a Serrano. In case in point, I have 3. Amanda's got 3 to 4 in there. We're perfect. We're gonna make a nice, beautiful. Now, we're gonna add the next component, cucumber. Cucumber's refreshing, it's hydrating, it's gonna elongate this cocktail, it's gonna add a beautiful green color as well as along with the cilantro, and I'm gonna do 4 hearty rounds of that. Now, these are the jalapeno and the cilantro are very pliable, but the cucumber not so much. We have to muddle this. Now I know Amanda's got her muddler. I have a beautiful little muddler that was gifted to me with a nice little knot here, which it's one of my coveted muddlers. I love these. But let me tell you something. In a pinch, I've done it. Everyone does it. You don't have a muddler, you can take a spoon, you can bend it so it flattens, and you can use that to muddle. You can also take anything blunt that you have on hand and just throw it in here. And the idea is to express and extract all of those beautiful juices of the cucumber, the oils of the cilantro, and obviously the oils, right? The very thing that spices up your cocktail, which is oils in the chili oils. Beautiful. Now, how do you know it's working? How do you know you've done a good job? I always tell people, nose it, smell it, right? You get that beautiful hint of vegetalness coming out. You get all this heat starting to come through. And this is what's going to flavor our margarita, right? This is nothing more. If you, I don't know if some of you guys are familiar with Milagro, but with this margarita called the freshest margarita, which is comprised of 2 parts Milagro Silver, 1 part fresh pressed lime juice, everything fresh, all the time. I highly recommend it. And then 3/4 parts agave nectar. And that's essentially what we're going to do next, put into this. So this is essentially the evolution, if you will, of our freshest margarita into a flavored marg, right? And you can do this time and time again by putting different fruits and vegetables, etc. In this case, we're just going to stick to a nice, savory, spicy margarita. So now that we have everything in there, we are going to then add the rest of our ingredients. Now, it's down again. We're going to start with Milagro Silver, 100% blue agave, as I mentioned before. We are proudly made and grown in the Jalisco Highlands, and all of our agaves come from the surrounding area of our distillery. Our process ensures that we have beautiful representation of the terroir where we're from. So it's nice, hearty, agave forward, vegetal, crisp, a lot of green notes, a lot of spice notes, and you're going to get some black pepper, white pepper, and then of course a lot of citrus notes. So we're going to go with 2 parts. I'm going to bring out my handy little measuring device here called a jigger. But again, if you don't have one of these in-house, not a problem. Use a shot glass if you want. Use any vessel you want to use, as long as you're keeping it in proportion to the proportions I'm sharing with you, right? So you can scale it up to 5, 10 cocktails if you want, or you can make 1 cocktail. It's not a problem. So we're going to start with 2 parts Milagro Silver. I'm going to pour that in here. Put that in our shaker. 1 part fresh pressed lime juice. That goes into our shaker. Now, that stemmed from this beauty here. I highly recommend anybody who loves to cook, loves to make cocktails. Cocktails are nothing more than liquid cooking. Please invest in a lime press, a citrus press, a couple of bucks, well worth it. If you don't have one of these, you probably already know what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to suggest some elbow grease, right? And if not, there's other ways you can, but it really is important that you use fresh. I can't stress this enough, and I'll tell you why. Oftentimes we say fresh, and people think, of course, fresh, obviously. But the context as to why is because when it's fresh, not only are you gonna get the beautiful benefits of it tasting freshly squeezed, sure. We all know the differentiators when you taste fresh squeezed orange, fresh squeezed lime. We all know what that tastes like. We know texturally what that feels like. But when it comes to a cocktail, we oftentimes don't understand the why. And the why is the more fresh pressed, the lower the pH, the higher the acidity. We want that acidity. That acidity is that burst in the mouth, that freshness that when we drink that margarita or that sour or that daisy, right, made with your favorite, whatever, rum or that whiskey sour, that beautiful brightness, that acidity that hits you right here, that's coming from the fresh lime. So not only do we want to retrieve its sweetness, because a lot of people don't know this, but lime is technically sweet, right? If you ever had lime, fresh pressed dry on your hands, you notice that your hands become tacky after a few minutes, right? It has a high enough concentration of sugars that it comes out in the flavor. So you want the less aerated, the less it's turned once it's sat out, right, and oxidized, the fresher it is, the more that brightness, the more of that pop you're going to get. And that's why we want fresh when it comes to cocktails. Not just because, of course, fresh, obviously, no, it's because there is a difference. And after 3 or 4 hours of a lime juice, for example, fresh press, I pressed this maybe 10 minutes ago, sitting out, this will start to turn and will no longer have that beautiful brightness to it, right? So that's why I encourage everybody to do fresh. And the beautiful thing is if you can't do yourself or don't want to do yourself, or you're going to make some cocktails for a large group, well, Mariano's also does fresh juicing. So there's a beautiful benefit there. All right, so we did 2 parts Milagro, 1 part fresh lime, and 3/4 part agave nectar. This is going to sweeten out our cocktail. It's going to round everything out. It's also derived from the blue agave plant. So everything agave right now. We're going to ice it down and then shake. What I will say before I get to that part is that if you do not have agave nectar, no fret. You can make a simple syrup at home. I would encourage a 1-to-1. Simply put, just like it sounds, it's really simple. It's taking water, heating it up over the stove, adding equal parts water to sugar, and just melting it down, right? Reducing it down, creating the syrup, and then you stick to the same proportions. You might want to scale it down to 1/2 a part, 3/4, depending on your sweet level, right? But right now we have a balanced cocktail, and that's why we recommend 3/4. All right, Amanda, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to shake.
I'm ready too, but can I say one thing first?
Yes.
You were talking about the aromas of when we were muddling like the herbs and the cilantro and the cucumber. It honestly, as we're building this in the shaker, it definitely like developed so much more aroma. And then when I just added the agave, I was like, oh my gosh, this really smells delicious. Like it's gonna be.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because it does. I've noticed that as well. When I sit here and talk about it, as I'm talking, it's starting to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Like,
that I can't quite explain. I would think it's just everything sort of coming together and sort of releasing, you know, but it's a pleasurable experience, that's for sure. So
yes.
I went ahead and I loaded down my shaker. It's got, you know, ice all the way to the top. You can notice that you see how it's frosty. That tells you where my ice level is. Now, a lot of people are fearful of ice, and I want to state another quick anecdote, sort of hack, if you will, and that is that you want to ice your shaker all the way to the top. Most of you might be thinking, well, if I do that, I'm going to over dilute the cocktail and it's going to be too much water, and I want a strong cocktail or a balanced cocktail. Quite the contrary. This is where art form meets science, right? The more ice you put into the shaker, the quicker the temperature of the liquid inside gets to the ice temperature, the quicker it balances out. The quicker it does that, it actually stops diluting as opposed to keep diluting. So if you have a full block of ice, let's say your standard ice, and you throw it in something hot, it's going to completely melt. But if you do it all the way to the top, it doesn't give the liquid too much time to melt all of it down. And what it does is the liquid starts to equalize to the temperature of the ice, which is what we want. And contrary to popular belief, we want dilution. That is what balances out our cocktail. That is what's going to make it nice and rounded. That's what's going to make it go smooth and texturally feel really good on the palate. We want about 30% of this cocktail to be ice, and you do that, or water, and you get that way by shaking 8 to 10 seconds. So let's do that, Amanda.
Okay.
Seal it. We're going to shake for about 8 to 10 seconds. Ready? Let's go. That's about 10 seconds. You'll notice it's got nice and frosty. That tells you that it's all brought down to temperature. Another little hack, a lot of people get to the point where they can't separate these two. It's really quite simple. Again, don't let it intimidate you. Where the shaker tins meet, you want to turn it 30 degrees until you start to see that separation, and that separation is where you hit it, and it starts to separate, and then you just release it and take it out. Now, as I mentioned before, I do not have the pleasure of having a built-in strainer, so I'm going to get my handy Hawthorne here. I already iced down my rocks glass, and I did a half rim of kosher salt. This salt, funny enough, comes from the state of Colima, which is just to the south of Jalisco, where Milagro is made. It's one of my favorite salt mines in the world. It comes out of Mexico, and it's just got a beautiful brininess that I love to use for cooking and cocktails. So I can bring that back from Mexico every time I go. And we're going to now pour this cocktail. You're going to see.
I'm going to go get my eyes. I'll be right back.
Absolutely. It's nice and green. Thank you, chlorophyll. You're going to see that beautiful hint of green, and those are all the vegetables that we essentially just muddled and used to flavor our cocktail. So last but not least, we always say in our industry, in the bartending community, in the cocktail community, a cocktail shouldn't only shouldn't just obviously taste good, it'd be balanced, which I'm hoping you agree it is, but also should entice you, it should invite you in, it should involve the eyes as well as the nose, right? As much of the senses as possible. So the aroma will call to you. Visually, you wanna let people know what's in the cocktail. So I'm gonna garnish with a cucumber. I use a couple here. And you can even use a sprig of cilantro if you want, right? A bouquet. It's really up to you. Amanda, you're gonna taste our work?
I mean, I think this looks beautiful. Does yours look? I missed when you held yours up, but this is a beautiful color.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was a green color.
Yeah. So for the audience out there, it is just as green as yours, but you have a completely, you have a clear glass. My glass is frosted gray, so you can't see it as much, but it's exactly the same color as yours.
I mean, this looks great. I can't wait to try it.
Let's do it. Salud.
Salud.
What did I tell you? It's barely spicy for me. And again, I was brought up by a mother who grew her own chili bushes.
Really? I mean, mine didn't taste spicy when I bit the pepper, but this has like perfect spiciness. But the agave, it's a really good balance. This is a very balanced.
That sweet spice.
With the sweet and the spicy and the salty.
Right, which is what you want, which is what we want. Vegetal, forward, agave, you know it's tequila, but it's balanced on the back end. You don't get any bite or burn. And you get those beautiful hints of vegetal qualities, which are, it's like salad in a glass, right? But much more fun. So hopefully those folks out there that decide to make this will enjoy it as much as we are.
I feel like it's a very healthy drink.
Let's believe that.
Yeah, I think there's someone else. Erin's making it too. I see some on and off. I see the shaker going. But Erin also has a question.
Absolutely.
A really good one. She wants to know, can you do anything with the rinds of the citrus once you squeeze it and you put it through that press?
Right. It's a great point. So here's the thing. Can you do anything with the rinds? You can if we're talking decoratively. I wouldn't necessarily put them in. So sometimes have you ever seen it happen? You can flip the rinds inside out and you can make a little boat to sit on top of your cocktail to then either garnish with something quite smaller that can be held inside, whether it's fruit confetti, whether it's edible, fruit that you want people to sort of pick out, that kind of thing. Why we don't want the rind portion actually in the cocktail is because there's a lot of bitter qualities to it. It's why even when you press lime, more often than not, you're extracting a little bit of the pith oil, and sometimes you have to be careful because too much of it will give you that bitter quality. So we want to steer clear of that. However, if what we're talking about is being utilitarian and making sure that we use everything and that we're responsible, I personally encourage that people then take those and obviously throw them down their garbage disposal, right? If they want to make it fragrant and like keep it aromatic and nice, it doesn't sometimes garbage disposals can go awry. So that's another great way to dispose of them and put them to use. But in a cocktail, it'd be more for decorative purposes, I would think,
Sure.
just because we don't want that pit.
That bitterness, right? Okay. And then agave, I think, Sarah, you mean the syrup? Does it ever go bad? I mean, mine does have an expiration date on it. It's
So a little unknown fact is more often than not, the FDA in the U.S. Well, you guys know this, being right a grocer. Everything has to have an expiration date on it. I think is the law. But so I don't want to mislead anybody. I would say go off of that for sure. What I would also say, though, sort of speaking out of both sides of my mouth, is that agave nectar lasts quite a long time.
Okay.
Particularly because it is, we talk about shelf stabilizing and how that elongates a due date or when it expires. Well, think about agave being essentially sugar. So it's talk about being stabilized. It's pretty stable for the most part.
All right. I mean, I always do go by the dates, but I also like to live life dangerously.
Well, I'll tell you what, I do as well. And then I had a group surprise me, and I wanted to make a big batch. It wasn't margaritas I think I made palomas, but I wanted just to give it a little touch. The grapefruit I was using wasn't very sweet that season, so I wanted to give it a little touch of sweetness. I had a little bit of Milagro agave nectar left, and it had expired maybe about 6 months prior. So I did a taste test, and it was fine. And and I'm more often than not, we're worried about not so much how it tastes, but what negative effects it will have on us. But it being sugar, I was like, I think we're good, and everybody's still around and happy. So I think
awesome. All right, and then Erin made hers and said, I think she's off camera now, but she said that she wasn't sure about the kick, but she really likes it. And I agree. I mean, it's not overly spicy. It's just a perfect balance, which is delicious.
And it just happens that we looked out today. The truth is, I've made this for I've got a really, really spicy batch of jalapenos, and people are like, "Woof!" But you put it best. What this is that sweet heat. What this is that vegetal sort of, that balance between a kick and that sweetness that comes in and sort of relieves you of it really quickly. So I would encourage, play with the heat level. It makes for an interesting drink, and it does counterbalance if done right. Any other questions?
Do you should you keep agave in the refrigerator, or is this
you can keep it in the cupboard. It's fine. Okay. You don't have to refrigerate after.
What if you don't put it in the cupboard?
You put it in the fridge?
You could put it in the fridge or the cupboard, but you would.
Yeah. It's meant to. Yeah, it stands well in the cupboard. It doesn't have to be refrigerated after opening. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Those are all the questions for this cocktail. So you know what that means.
Well, so we're about to go into the second cocktail. Before I do, I will share with you quickly how I came across this. Amanda paid me a great compliment. It's one of my favorite cocktail aprons. You can imagine I have quite a few of them. Over the years, I've collected them to become a favorite thing of mine. I've had great friends who started their own brands, make them, custom make them, etc. But this here is out of a line that a friend of mine made out of an account, a bar, an agave-focused bar, Mexican spirits-focused bar in St. Petersburg, Russia, called El Copitas. And El Copitas, meaning little cups to drink mezcal from, designed their own aprons. And they made this one for me, and I absolutely love it. You'll see the little key phrases like taco, and down here it says tequila, mezcal, and all these other things, all these references to Mexican culture and food, and obviously tequila. So it's one of my prized possessions. I love it. I think I'm the only one in the world that has it. So this is one of those, from Russia with love moments. So
it's amazing. It totally is. It's really unique, and it looks really great.
Thank you. So keeping in line with our thematic, we just did a spicy margarita, right, called the Mercadito, right? The Mercado, i.e., again, funny enough, it plays right into Mariano's, right? It's a market. And so this next cocktail is a very simple one. This is what we call a pantry cocktail. The odds are you have most of these ingredients at home already, and I can tell you different ways you can make it. But if you know a paloma, which is a traditional Mexican cocktail typically made with either blanco reposado tequila, grapefruit soda is traditionally how it's made in Mexico. Different parts of Mexico, whether it's the north, the mid-occidental part, or the south, will use different types of grapefruit sodas, but it's usually that a little bit of lime juice, and rock salt. That's it, right? Over ice, that's typically it. It's essentially a highball, which, as you most know, most of you might know by now, are very much backed by popular demand. And what a highball is nothing more than your base spirit and a bubbly, filler or a bubbly ingredient to top it off. That's it. So perhaps one of the most famous highballs out of Mexico is the Paloma. So what I'm going to show you today is how to make a very simple version of it without getting into the fresh ingredients part, but I'll give you a riff for how you can make it with fresh grapefruit as well. But this one here essentially just requires 3 ingredients. And that was by design, right? We wanted to get people to understand 3 ingredient cocktails are easy to make. If your cocktail requires 3 ingredients and it's a laborious process, we're doing something wrong, right? Like 3 ingredients should equate ease. So that's what we're doing here. So I have my Collins glass, as you can see here. Iced all the way to the top. I'm not going to put rock salt around the rim, although I think Amanda is. I feel like she likes salt. I like salt. I didn't
on this one. I did on the other one.
Okay, well then follow my lead then. I'll show you what to do instead. I did want to make a comment regarding salt. A lot of people fear it, and I understand the why. And by all means, if you have to steer clear of salt based on a dietary restriction or what have you, by all means, don't let me talk you out of that. What I do want to state, however, is that when we specifically salt a cocktail, a lot of the times it's with intention. And margaritas, why we do the kosher salt rim is because that salt, that frothiness does open up the palate a little bit and does act with the rest of the ingredients to give you that little bit of zing, that pop that most margaritas are known for. So I'm all for when somebody, I have tons of friends who steer clear of salt, but I feel why I preface that with this drink in particular is because the Paloma, for me, almost I can't have it without salt. That salt is just that enough of a brininess that opens up the cocktail that I feel is needed for this cocktail. So anyway, all the way to the top, no salt now, but you can salt the glass if you wish. However, I do encourage icing all the way to the top. And we're going to start with 1.5 parts instead of 2 parts of our Milagro. But instead of the Blanco, we're going to use the Reposado. Reposado tequilas are tequilas that spend a minimum of 2 months in contact with some type of wood. The type of wood is up to the distiller. In our case, we use American white oak whiskey casks. Everything in our product line that comes in contact with oak does so via a barrel. We don't use troughs. We don't use vats. Now, I want to pause there and go over to Amanda real quick. She's using another one of our tequilas, and that's our Select Barrel Reserve line. Now, this one spends 2 to 4 months in contact with American white oak whiskey casks. Amanda's does not. Hers is different. Hers is a blend of 2 types of oaks. That's why we call it Select Barrel Reserve. We put tequila down in American white oak whiskey cask, and we also lay tequila down in brand new French virgin oak, right? So imagine those 2 oaks being laid down at the same time and then being extracted and being blended together. That's what you have there. You have essentially an average of closer to 4 to 6 months, and essentially it's 2 types of oaks blended together. So your tequila is going to give you nuances and benefits from those 2 types of oaks. So that differentiates in flavor to this, but that also makes a phenomenal Paloma. So she just beat me.
It's a beautiful bottle. I mean, actually, it's the way it's made. I mean, it's actually, this is one of the coolest bottles I've ever seen.
Yeah, we've won tons of awards for both the flavor and the packaging. It's a beautiful expression of agave with a literal expressive agave plant on the inside. That's our version of the agave being half harvested. We cut away at the leaves, and you notice most of the leaves are cut at the base of that plant, exposing the heart, what we call the piña, and that's the part that goes into the tequila making process.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful. You ready to pour?
I'm ready.
All right. So we're gonna go 1.5 parts. You'll see it's got beautiful golden color. This is what we call a built cocktail. What does that mean? That means that no shaker is required. As you can see, it goes into the glass, and there it'll stay until we go in with a couple of next steps. The next thing is we want to incorporate a little bit of lime juice, because that lime, again, is going to bring us all the beautiful nuances that I'd mentioned before. So I'm going to go to my trusty fresh pressed lime, and I'm going to go with 1/2 part this time as opposed to a full. And again, that's going to go into our glass here. directly. And lastly, I'm going to top off with grapefruit soda. Now, this particular cocktail I named La Paloma Rosada, the pink paloma, because albeit it works with your regular grapefruit soda, I was really pressing for folks to get a pink grapefruit soda, which has a slightly different taste profile to it. Now, I'm using cute grapefruit today, and that's because they developed these flavors specifically for cocktails, and you can find these in any store these days. I would encourage you to go out, get a pink grapefruit soda, get one that's highly carbonated. Believe it or not, my friends make fun of me too. Don't worry about it. You can laugh. But there is science to a lot of this stuff, right? And the more carbonated, the higher the carbonation in this, the more it's expressive it'll allow this cocktail to be, because it'll transfer a lot of those nuances and those flavors from the other ingredients that are in this cocktail. So it's by design that it's highly carbonated, because the higher the carbonation, again, the more fortified that cocktail will be, if that makes sense.
Is that the Topo Chico one, or is it a different brand?
No, it's Q Grapefruit from Q Sodas, but like Topo Chico is a great example, right? Like I love tequila sodas. And if you do, like my favorite with Topo Chico, for example, is Milagro Reposado, 1.5 parts, and then I top off with Topo, and instead of lime, I use lemon. Now, Topo Chico, funny you mention it, it's from Monterrey, the northern part of Mexico, but they also, in Mexico in general, almost all sodas that come out of Mexico, they're always highly carbonated. It's just a cultural thing. We like really zingy sodas that, you know, tickle the back of the throat and that whole thing. So Topo Chico, by chance, or, you know, just purely being what it is by existence, has become a great cocktail ingredient because it's so highly carbonated that it helps a whiskey highball, a rum, you know what I mean? It just works really well with that. So yeah, that's a great example.
It's my favorite, sparkling. I mean, I love it. It's very bubbly and it's always so refreshing. Right,
and it's the carbonation that you'll know. You'll notice sometimes certain American sort of cocktail ingredients are just carbonated sodas aren't nearly as carbonated. And again, that's just culture. That's how we do things here. So what's happening now is you have a lot of people that are making sodas, purposely making them or over carbonating them so that they work better in cocktails. All right. So what grapefruit are you using, by the way? Are you using natural?
I used Izzy. We sell Izzy.
Oh, love it. Yes.
But I also love the San Pellegrino sodas, all the flavors. I think that would have been really good in here because that has a big expressive bubble. I think these bubbles are to me like a little too tiny. Like they're not.
Right. Yeah, you know, you're speaking my language. Exactly. And the San Pellegrino ones also, they're made with cocktails in mind as well. So as much as they know people are going to drink them, and they contain a little bit of fresh juice, right? Those are the ones you're referring to. They make amazing ingredients. Yeah. So
I think like Spindrift is another one that we sell that has it's with juice in it, but we shouldn't use things like bubbly or LaCroix with this because it doesn't have the juice, it just has the flavor.
Right, but remember, you're not reliant on the juice just because you have, if you're going to make a Paloma, sure, if you're going to make a tequila and soda, that might very well be a compliment.
Right.
You know, but for this case, we want a little bit of that grapefruit, we want the lime juice, and then, I don't know if you guys saw me do this, but I took my handy spoon and I just made sure all the ingredients were mixed together. I see that Amanda garnished hers with a full wheel as I recommended. I'm gonna use.
You taught me. This is what I learned today, everyone. I think it was so cool.
I'm gonna use a wedge. And put that here. But here is the last piece. I have some the kosher sauce in here. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of a pinch, and I'm gonna toss it on top over the ice and let it just go inside and let that salinity just sort of go in and meld and as I drink this, right, it'll come to me. So now I'm going to cheers you and the folks out there that decided to make this with us or that are watching. Hopefully this is entertaining enough or has inspired you to go out and make cocktails.
I think we are entertaining. We're very entertaining. I mean, wait, this is so cool that you taught me how to do this. I never would have thought to do this. This looks gorgeous.
Right, and what I wanted to tell folks out there.
Have people over. This is like a good party trick right here.
Yeah, and if I mentioned, so this is your classic Paloma, a really quick riff on one. If you want to use fresh grapefruit soda, 1.5 parts Milagro, still half part lime, believe it or not, grapefruit juice, if you use grapefruit juice, in place of grapefruit soda, it doesn't have the acidity you still need. So it's always okay to do maybe 3/4 ounce, an ounce, part of grapefruit juice and still fortify it with 1/2 ounce or 1/2 part of lime juice, just so that it gives us that acidity. And then top off something like Topo Chico, for example, would make a phenomenal fresh Paloma. There we go. Salud, Amanda.
Right.
Let's taste our work.
This is another like very refreshing, awesome. The salt just adds a whole other layer. You actually can taste the grapefruit flavor more from it, I think.
It does. What salt does, the salinity does, is it's a transporter also, right? Just like the way the bubbles are. Think about how beverage sodas and your mineral waters get carbonated. Oftentimes it's sodium, right? That's part of the carbonation process. So all these things start to make sense when you realize, oh, okay, there's sense to there's something to that, right? It's not by chance, and that's why I always say, cocktail making really is that intersection between art and just an art form, right, and science, right? There's a little bit of science to it as well in terms of why we use a particular.
You said, this is like liquid cooking, and it is. I mean, I think your presentations, both of them, really have been true to that because they are, quality ingredients. They're using, herbal flavors. I mean, I've never salted a cocktail before, but it really made a significant difference in how it tastes. It's different than having it on the rim where you just get that, like salt flavor right away. It really just enhances the complexity of the drink. And then also I think using the reposado, it has, because it's aged a little bit and it has that more caramel flavor, it adds so much more complexity to the Paloma than just using like a silver.
Yeah, it's funny. People always go, Jaime, silver makes perfect sense. It's got a lot of brininess to it. It's got that lime, that citrus, that vegetal note. It melds well. I'm like, absolutely. But to your point, I like everything you mentioned about why we use a reposado in this cocktail. I also like the fact that I get a little bit of that dryness in the back from the oak, and that to me is pleasurable. It's pleasant. So it's again understanding the contrast and complement of things. And for those folks out there that I love to cook, they'll understand it right away. Oftentimes people try to make sense of this in a very linear fashion, but it's no different than when someone says, do you like peanut butter and jelly, right? Or are you a chocolate and salt type of person? Those two things are highly known to be complementary to one another. But the truth is one of those contrasts each other and the other complements one another. And that's the idea of cooking, is that you oftentimes cook in ways to either contrast, the sweetness of that dish by adding something savory, or you complement that sweetness by adding something refreshing, right? Or something that still complements it and contrasts it just enough, but perhaps isn't polar opposites to it. That is what you're doing here.
Right.
It's really no different.
I'm liquid cooking. I think I'm really good at it.
Good. Hey, let me tell you, some of us are liquid cooking than we are at cooking over the.
I think it's awesome, right? We got some questions. So, and these are really good ones. Actually, my mom wanted you to know that my grandmother used to drink rye in a highball glass like this. So I just thought that was funny. Yeah, Ro, my mom's watching. She always, she'll give us a critique after. I'll give you all of her feedback, but I'm sure she'll love it. Someone asked what the price point is of this, and I got this as a gift for my two best friends on Staten Island. They gave it to me 2 years ago for Cinco de Mayo. So I don't know where they bought it, but it's a beautiful bottle, but what is it?
Well, the price point is roughly around $45 or so not too bad, sometimes 50, 52. I can tell you that depending where you are, I would say you're in Chicago, so roughly around 55, 60 bucks. I'd go around there. You can get it at Binny's. For those of you,
we don't sell this particular one. The other two that we're using, I think right now they're actually on sale for $22.99 at the stores, depending on the store, which is obviously, I think it's usually $30. So
for the regular one.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then someone asked, there was another question about, for the Mercadito. This is from Margaret. For the Mercadito, what are some of the other combinations of muddled ingredients you would suggest? Because that was a combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share, first and foremost, I'm going to write in the chat box my Instagram handle, as well as encourage you guys to go to at Milagro Tequila on Instagram, or milagrotequila.com, because you'll see all the variations there. And once I will say this, and once we start to vary, it no longer is a mercadito, but essentially what I did was I took our regular fresh margarita, which is 2 parts Milagro silver, 1 part lime, 3/4 part agave nectar, and then I started to fold different things in. So as Amanda mentioned, like these two today were, one was savory but yet refreshing. That's kind of my style in general, particularly when tequila, unless I go highball or I go, sort of a stirred cocktail, forward warming cocktail for the winter. As far as the margarita play is concerned and the muddling in, it is countless, which is why I suggest you go there. But we're talking anything from folding in watermelon to mint to coriander seed and infusing that in the bottle to God, you name it. I do cantaloupe variety, versions of this. Essentially rosemary, burnt rosemary, fresh rosemary, any fruit and herb you can think of. Fennel works really well in cocktails. To any type of citrus fruit, to any type of vegetable, to any type of stone fruit, I have worked with. And so what I have for you in that Instagram, in our feed, as well as our website or even Facebook, is that you'll find a lot of these cocktails are premised around combination of herb, fruit, veggie, and it's endless, to be quite honest. Blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, right?
We're gonna have all this stuff here right now. I even have fennel, and I have rosemary and a bunch of other fresh herbs.
I love rosemary cucumber, for example. Rosemary cucumber watermelon is one of my favorite combos. Rosemary watermelon, amazing. Tangerine rosemary, tangerine tarragon. Again, it's endless in terms of what you can do. And again, I would encourage you. You might think, oh, tangerine, there's already citrus in there. Leave out the lime. Don't leave out the lime, because lime, it has more acidity than some of these others. It ranks one of the highest in acidity, and we need that for the cocktail.
Right.
But what you're using the other, acidity or the other citric elements for are for the flavoring component, right? That's going to give you that beautiful tangerine note.
And I think for those of us that have been taking these classes through the quarantine, I think we learned that it's really great to go into your pantry and to find things in your fridge, even to dig deep in there, like maybe some spice blends that you haven't seen, used in a long time. But I mean, I think that's where we're all getting really creative, but learning from you, that you can take that creativity and take the nectarines or the blackberries that you have and kind of come up with your own combinations.
No, absolutely right. One of my favorite cocktails, I'll leave you guys with this, that I like to make that a lot of people forget about, for example, is today we muddle this stuff in, but if you're in a state of mind where you don't want to muddle, you want a cleaner cocktail, perhaps you're running around and you want to make a bigger batch, take your agave nectar, take whatever sweetener you're going to impart, whether it's simple syrup or agave nectar, put it on the stove, reduce it down, heat it up, and infuse whatever flavor you want to bring in through that. For example, you mentioned spices. One of my favorite things to do is to take black cracked peppercorns, toss them in a simple syrup, reduce it down, cook over the fire for 7 to 10 minutes, extract all that beautiful flavor, and now that becomes both my sweetener and my flavoring agent. I just make a margarita with black pepper, and people love it. It's sharp, it's bright. There's nuance of elements of obviously the peppercorn that people really like and go, oh, this is interesting, and you can do pink peppercorn if you want to stay away from black. The opportunity it truly is endless. You don't want to bring in the peppercorn via the simple syrup. You want to use it as a garnish. Well, then hell, take your kosher salt and either take a mortar pedestal, and make and grind it down or food process it together and dehydrate some cilantro. Put it in there. Dehydrate. I love to dehydrate the rinds of limes and lemons.
How do you dehydrate cilantro? How do you even do that?
You can put that in the oven. You can put that in a dehydrator. And what you do then is you extract all the liquid from it, right? The moisture from it. And now you have this essentially an herb like you would, any packaged herb you bought. But remember, it's done at home. So it's still going to have far more flavor than you would on something packaged that's been industrially, dehydrated. And now you can break that down into whether it's a sugar blend, rim or a salt rim. And now you've added another element of flavor to your rims, right? Whether it's chili, whether it's, like a tajin style, whether it's citrus, whether it's herbs, easy. It really is easy.
I really like this sort of endless discovery of combinations because I think for, Sarah and I working in the grocery store all the time, we're always exposed to what fruits in season, like fresh herbs. And, I have a whole bunch of cilantro in the kitchen. I'm like, oh, maybe I should take half of it after we're done and put it on the dehydrator setting. So I might do that, and then I'll tag you when I make something with it.
We all know, right? We all know cilantro goes bad, right? How finicky is cilantro? This thing here is going to last me probably to the time we're done, and it's going to be so wilted that it will never revive again. So I have to think quickly, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to make it quick, guacamole to complement my cocktails, or do I want to dehydrate it and use it for later? And that's a great way to preserve it and use it for later.
My only other tip for saving cilantro is to make a, oh my God, I'm spacing on, what's the sauce with the parsley and the cilantro, the herb sauce with the olive oil?
Yeah. It's like a mojo. It's like,
chimichurri.
Yeah, it's like a chimichurri. And it's simple. And just use your olive oil base or your oil base and done, right? But but the point is, we know it's going to go bad. This is just one more way to preserve it. For later use. Yeah.
Okay, so Rob, there's two more questions.
Sure.
Would you use salt flakes or regular salt? Like when you're salting this.
That's a great question, because the truth is, you will never, unless it's a really hard day and I can't get out to buy what I need, I steer clear of processed salt as much as possible.
Okay.
So
do you like a Maldon flake, or do you like a?
Oh my God, Maldon salt is amazing if you want to use it. It's not cheap, as we all know. If you want to, absolutely. A kosher salt, I think, is good enough. And then of course you can expound from there. And again, if you want to get peak Himalayan salt into the mix, a black lava rock salt, go for it. That's the beauty of cooking, of making anything, is that you can manipulate it all you want. It really is about what flavor you're going for, what you want to experience.
Black salt looks so cool in this drink. I think that would look great.
Right. Plus, we talked about the visual engagement part, and it adds to that, right? Because no doubt someone's going to say to you, what is in that? What's this black thing? Most people see anything black and they get apprehensive or scared to begin with. But if you just tell somebody, don't worry about it, taste it, it came from Hawaii or whatever, that's a great conversation starter as well.
It's lava salt. I love it. Melissa says that sugar is more her style, but she'd love to try these next time, which is awesome. And she loves the idea of a paloma. And then Rob C says, we may have mentioned this before, but can you describe the difference between the Milagro Tequila Barrel Select Reserve compared to the original, which I guess.
Absolutely. I mentioned it a little bit as is it a gentleman? Is it a guy asking the question? I mentioned, Rob. So, what it is we have Milagros comprised of 6 expressions in our entire portfolio. We have what we call our core range, which are these elongated bottles, as we mentioned, and then the bottles that Amanda showed you. And all 3 of the bottles look like the one she has, at least for now. We're in the process of a repackage. But our core range here, these bottles, and then of course I have the añejo right over here, which I love to make an old fashioned with, if you're into that. These bottles here, are made exactly the same, with a slight exception to the select barrel range, with the exception that if they're aged, if at all, this one has no aging whatsoever, but the Reposado Añejo come in contact with American white oak whiskey casks for a different period of time each. For example, this one's 2 to 4 months, and this one is just over a year, closer to 12 to 14 months, right? Sometimes up to 16, depending how wasted the barrel is and how much longer we have to use it to extract all those nuances from it. So these only see whiskey barrels or white American oak barrels that have once contained whiskey, right? The select barrel line, the one that Amanda has, that entire line is a blend of 2 types of barrels. So we have Milagro Tequila that goes into both American whiskey casks and brand new French virgin casks. Okay, they go into these casks for a predetermined amount of time. They're brought out and then they're blended together. Our Milagro Select Barrel Silver is roughly about 45 days on average, and it's a blend of those 2 barrels. So that's what we typically call, it's the silver still because it's below 60 days, but it's we call a mellowed white because it has in fact come in contact with oak. The Reposado, which Amanda has in hand, is closer to 4 to 6 months, and the Añejo is closer to 2 years. So you see how they vary in terms of age and contact and time with barrel, but also 2 types of barrels as opposed to our core range is just 1 type of barrel. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about that, I'll quickly tell you, American white oak brings a different nuance. You get vanillin that comes from it. French oaks give you a lot of caramel. You get some nuttiness out of French oaks. So all those things are what is now, the tequila is now extracting or incorporating into the liquid through what we call the esterification process, or i.e. aging process.
Delicious.
You're
Rob
very
says
welcome, Rob.
thank you. Awesome. Well, I think that might be all the questions. Oh, wait, here we go. This is a good one, Christine and Marco. I see you guys. Hi.
Añejo.
What was the type of tequila used for an old fashioned? Got it. Okay.
The añejo. So essentially 2 parts Milagro Añejo, 1 bar spoon of agave nectar, a little bit more if you want a little sweeter, a nice solid piece of ice. I do grapefruit bitters with mole bitters. They're everywhere online. You can find them. I know it sounds very esoteric, but the truth is they're easier to get your hands on. So if you like mole and other Mexican ingredients, which is comprised of different chocolates and spices, a mole bitter has the taste of mole without actually being mole, right? That is it. You take that, put it over ice, stir it down. Do not shake it. You want a nice, silky and smooth. Pour it over into a chilled coupe. That's it. Or if you want it up, or if you want a typical classic old fashioned over rocks in a rocks glass over ice, express. I would for that one I typically do grapefruit peel, and I usually torch it so that you just torch the expressed oils. It's amazing. I love it. If you never have an old fashioned with agave tequila in particular, mezcal is another great one. I highly encourage it.
Can you send us that recipe so we can
Absolutely.
share it with everybody? Because that's a great one. I love your style. I love how there's layers and like char and herbs. I mean, it's all really cool stuff.
Yeah, and I like to keep it as it's funny going back to cooking, but I like to keep it as natural as possible. Whatever ingredients you make, it's great, but ultimately, I want it to be accessible. It may take you a little bit of elbow grease, but usually the products themselves are very accessible.
All right, we have more questions, so I hope you have time.
I have time. Go for it.
Can you explain the difference between tequila and mezcal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tequila, like a cognac, right? A cognac is technically a brandy, right? It falls into that category of spirit. It is a distilled spirit coming from the grape plant, the grape fruit. And so, not grapefruit, right, but the grape berry. So tequila is a type of mezcal, the way that cognac is a type, right, of brandy. So you have a overarching, style or type, which is mezcal, which is to say mezcal by definition is any distillate deriving from the agave plant is by definition mezcal. Tequila comes from agave plant, specifically the blue agave plant. It's the only type of agave that we can use to produce tequila. For those of you who do not know this, Mexico as a country is very giving in terms of the landscape, in terms of the abundance of things that have come from there. Tomatoes, Italy's famous for their pasta sauce. Italy didn't have tomatoes. They got them from Mexico, right? Oh, certain types of turkeys. So certain things, like most things in the world, are endemic to certain parts of the world. Well, Mexico gave their contribution, the Middle East gave theirs, etc. And one of the things Mexico gave to the world are like chocolate, right? You guys know cacao beans exist in other parts of the world, but it's the Aztecs that actually made chocolate and created it and invented it. So there's a lot of cool nuances like that going on in Mexico. And so essentially, when it comes to mezcal, that's the other thing, right? It started off as a drink, and then it was distilled, and then it just started to evolve from there. There are over 100 and anywhere between 150 to 200 plus types of agave that are native, endemic to Mexico, but there are only 45 to 50 that we can use for the production of any type of agave distillate. So in tequila, by denomination of origin, meaning by law, as a definition, we can only use blue agave. But for example, mezcal, if you're into mezcal, right now they're using an average of about 40 to 45 different types of agave. It's why when you go to purchase it, not only does it say mezcal, but it'll say espadín, it'll say arroqueño, it'll say all these different types of agave. So that is the biggest distinction, is that they're both agave distillates, but tequila can only be made in a specific region within 5 states using the blue agave plant, and mezcal can be made, right now we're back to 8 states, using any type of those 45 permitted, right? And they're typically also, it used to be that it was 100% factual. Now it depends on the brand, but it used to also be that another defining factor is that mezcal, if you know it, and you love it, hopefully, for its smokiness. And that's because by default, the agave plant is typically cooked subterranean, underground, in conical ovens. Tequila no longer is cooked that way. That's why it doesn't have that smoke. So that's another differentiator. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I just know it has that smokier flavor that I really love. And I think it's a good sipper, but I also think it's cool to mix in cocktails because of that flavor. It's kind of like mixing cocktails with like a peaty scotch or
100%.
100%.
And where scotch gets a smoke from the peat, the agave plant derives a smoke from it being literally cooked over stone that's been heated through pine wood and other types of wood native to Mexico. And that's been done for centuries. So before mezcal was distilled and then became tequila, mezcal used to be eaten by the Mayans and the Aztecs, right? So like mezcal was not just something you drank. Mezcal was the byproduct of the plant being cooked. And that's what gave it the name. And the name was mezcali, not mezcal. But the Spaniards came in and, you know, they couldn't quite say it. So it got contracted to mezcal.
Well, I mean, that's great. I understand. I hope, Melissa, are you good? Oh, she's awesome. She said awesome. Thank you. So.
You're welcome, Melissa.
So, Jaime, when you're allowed to travel back to Chicago, you're going to come visit Sarah and I, and we could do an event.
I would love to. Now that I know you guys, I was telling the ladies that whenever I batch big or we do big events, we've gone to Mariano's tons of times where I'm like, get me as much as fresh, you know, of juice as you can possibly get me, because more often than not, it's me pressing or, you know, having someone else press for us. So if you ever see us out in market, know that any of our brands, we're in the house with other brands such as Hendrix and Monkey Shoulder and Reka Vodka. We only ever use fresh ingredients. So we're constantly looking, you know, that's how I came to know your store.
That's awesome.
Yes,
well, we
absolutely.
think you're so great, and we can't wait till travel is easier and we all can stay safe and healthy. And you can come to an event in store because we have this cool, before quarantine started, Sarah and I put together this awesome kitchen at one of our stores. We were going to call it our Tastemaker Kitchen, where we could have hands-on classes for customers with experts like you. And it would be great to, you know, be with you in person. So we'll
I would love that. There's nothing like human interaction, right? If there's anything that this has really taught me is that I actually like being face-to-face in front of people.
Yeah. I mean, this is nice too, because it's a fun way for us to pass time and learn some good stuff. So, I mean, this alone is like, I'm doing this citrus carpaccio thing that you taught me. So it's a
beautiful
cool trick. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome.
All right. So we're going to send out the extra recipe for the old fashioned when Jaime sends it to us. And you have to follow Jaime. He gave us his Instagram, Jay the Tequila Guy, and then at Milagro Tequila. You can follow me at Amanda Puck and Mariano's Market at Mariano's Market. And we will see everybody hopefully next week. Who's next week, Sarah? Salvini.
You're in for a treat.
The family of Brand. William Grant and Son. So.
Naomi's great.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you very much for having me. Salud to your health. Be well, measure responsibly, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.